Wild West firm, even though for a year,
Mm.
that must have taught you some traits, characteristics, attributes. What were the good things that you took out of that Wild West experience?
I learned how to recruit, and I learned how to recruit in a difficult market. So I started in technology recruitment in like 2001 when, there was a tech crash at that time as well. And how can you make money when there's nothing out there, when the whole market's going in? At first, I had a very, very small job. So I was just sourcing candidates for like partners or other people. And they didn't respect me at all. So I shared a desk, like literally our knees were touching with another guy because they didn't want to give us our own desk. So I shared a desk with a guy and would just make tons of phone calls all day. And, I finally convinced one consultant to say, hey, if I can go meet your client, I'm going to be able to pitch and recruit and find better candidates for you. So please just let me out of the office. And they let me out of the office, and then I sold a retainer on that day. And I'm like, okay, I could be pretty good at this. So,
that's good. And why I'm asking that isn't just because it's a generic, what did you learn? It's because of the experience we've spoken about so far. I'm pretty sure a lot of people can relate to. English teaching, assistant language teacher. I just stand there and I read what I'm told. And even the Wild West experience, from the offset, it sounds like, that's a bad place. We shouldn't work there. It was bad. But there are always good points that we can pull from these. And I just want your take on what were the good points that you would pull out of even bad experiences?
I think there's value in bad jobs. So especially when you're young, like my actual first job after I got kicked out of high school, I was a trashman. So I picked up trash. I rode around on the back of a trash truck, and that was tough. Like 100 kilograms, like at every stop, 50 kilograms, like stuff smelled from 4 a.m. to like 5 p.m. I get home at 7. I, passed out. So tough type of thing like that. Similar to early Wild West recruitment, it makes you very, very tough. And as I become an entrepreneur and as I look out and you go through different kind of recruitment markets in different ways, when the economy is good, when it's bad, you've got a psychological reserve that, okay, hey, things could be worse. I've been through worse type of situation. I've been in work environments where people are rude and mean and unprofessional, and I survived. And I learned to work very hard, right? So I'd be there at 8:30 a.m. or 8 a.m. and leave at like 9 p.m. And, in your 20s, that's really good. Like, and you gain respect. If you can survive in those type of places, and those connections last for years and years. So I'd say if you've never had a bad job and you're just looking for a great work environment, it's tough to really appreciate. And I think later, like when Wahl and Case, we'd hire people pretty young or right out of college. And of course we weren't perfect, but we were pretty darn good in terms of the workplace, but they wouldn't appreciate it. And then they leave and say, oh, hey, that was actually pretty good. And I made a mistake leaving. I'd like to come back. And there's those type of conversations. So yeah, I think bad jobs when you're young, there's real value in those.
Helps build resilience.
Resilience, and I look at a psychological depth, how much pain you can tolerate. And you understand, because as you do more in the world and you try more and you take more risks, there's going to be a lot of difficulties. And if you haven't really experienced pain, then it's going to be hard to overcome it, right? And you might just want to stay in a ball and like, oh, I'm going to run from it. But
we're not advocating going for bad jobs on purpose.
I actually would. I really think, doing difficult work, there's meaning in it and understanding. And I think it gives you compassion and empathy as well.
How would you know when is the time to leave a bad job?
That is a great question. Probably you don't want to stay too long, right? But whether it's a year or 2 or 3 or something like that, probably not more than 3, because I look at, if you want to build something and hopefully, your viewers and most people want to build something, you need to stay at some place for 3 years or more, right? And if you're in a bad job, you don't really want to help that company build like something even worse or type of situation. So, but if you're there for 1 or 2 years to get into an industry, like just to break into it, or just for like some rough experience and some skill sets. Like I learned like the cutting edge of sales, not the cutting like sophisticated, like the hard, difficult, really part of sales, which, you know, if you have a brand and if you have a big company that has a brand and prestige and marketing dollars, it becomes much easier to sell. But when there's nothing, it's hard to sell. And that hones your kind of deal reading ability and your sophistication in sales. And it's very hard to do with places with brands. So, and I think that experience is great. And once you can say, okay, I've got some pretty decent skills here, I can survive, I could thrive here, but I want to build something, that would be the time, I'd say, to move.
3 years.
Or less.
Okay. To pick up the skills that...
And if you're in a good place, 3 years or more.
So I guess this is a good time to mention, now that we've talked about your early days, the tough jobs, and that you're talking about building and moving on and taking what you need to build, we're going to time skip a little bit.
Sure.
And you spent a good 7 years at Robert Walters. And after that, you then went and founded Wahl & Case Recruitment Company. And during founding Wahl & Case and doing Wahl & Case, you founded Red Brick Ventures, which is an investment firm, angel investment incubation firm in Tokyo. And during that time, you wrote a book, The Quiet Comeback, with 20 of Japan's leading tech startup entrepreneurs. What I'm wondering, and I'm sure the audience are too, is sounds like you picked up the skills that you needed. What suddenly made you then feel, I'm going to start my business, and then another business, and then write a book?
So Robert Walters was fantastic. So they taught me professionalism and taught how to scale a recruitment firm. So recruiting business is all about people, and it's about management infrastructure and like development processes. And I learned that there. Incredibly thankful. When people get to 30 or 40, people tend to kind of reassess their lives. It's, you know, one of these big mile markers in your life. And am I satisfied? And am I happy? And I wasn't. I was in a very senior position in Japan. So I was on the board here in Japan. And I would go to board meetings with ideas like, hey, we could innovate like this, or why don't we try this, or why don't we do this? And I think it was 2 years of those. I forget how often they were, but every time I was rejected. It was just sit back down. You're an aggressive American. All your ideas are going to lose money. Come on, just stop it. So I kind of looked at it really as a hero's journey for me. Like, you know, I'm the hero of this story. And I'm like, okay, I could stay here. I could make quite a lot of money. I could get more promotions if I'm willing to wait it out. And it'd be easy. And like, I could do what they asked for me. And for me, I could grow what they needed to grow, what the business was asking, but it didn't use much of my mental capacity. It didn't feel that challenging. So it's like, okay, I could use 20, 30, 40% of my skills and do what's needed. And then I feel like my soul's going to atrophy. So I kind of framed it as like, okay, I could stay here, have a comfortable life, or I could go be an entrepreneur, see if these ideas really have value, and also to test myself. And then going back to my motivations, I think testing myself and seeing what I'm capable of is a big motivation. It's like, okay, how good am I really? Like, I'm pretty good here. I've been biggest biller in the world. I was like most senior American, kind of youngest director at the time, type of thing like that. So I was doing well, but it was just going to wait. And I didn't want to wait, and I wanted to really see what I was capable. So I became an entrepreneur. And we knew the industry. So when you kind of do a startup, you know, there's this 4-quadrant type of boxes, the industry growing, and do you know the industry? And if you're both on those, if you're on the extent like I knew the industry of recruitment, the recruitment industry is growing, so we're in the top right quadrant, this is where startups can be successful. So quickly we made money, and in like year 2 or 3, we had excess money. It's like, okay, what can we do with some of our excess money? And I was trying to innovate within recruitment. So that was my desire for starting the business. We want to innovate this industry. And I love recruitment. And it's incredibly important for all sides of the equation, for companies, for people. But it's horribly inefficient. Time-wise, money-wise, emotion-wise, psychology-wise, like so much inefficiency. People make horrible decisions. But what I found in those first couple of years is you couldn't innovate a recruitment agency because the business model is set. And you could only do like 1 or 2 or 3% type of innovation. That's not really going to change things. So, okay, it has to be technology. And also at the time, this is 2010, this is relatively soon after Lehman shock and the financial crisis and stuff. We were meeting a lot of elite Japanese as candidates, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, University of Tokyo, and they'd all be like, I admire what you've done. You became an entrepreneur and you did it. The market's still horrible. We're still down. Why did you do this now?
Yeah.
So it's hearing all of these very smart people saying they admire it. They kind of want to become entrepreneurs. We had this excess money. We were starting to hire a couple of engineers. We had a footprint and an office in San Francisco. And at that time, there was still a time arbitrage.
Yeah.
So what you would see as trending startups in San Francisco, it would take about a year or two for that business model to come to Japan.
Yeah.
So now there's almost no arbitrage. What is starting there, you have it right here.
Yeah.
But there were very few entrepreneurs, there were very few kind of startups back at that time. It's like, okay, I want to also pay it forward. So let's put all of these pieces together. And through one of the customers at a time, we learned this business model where we created startups. So what we would do is say, okay, here's a trending new business model, startup in San Francisco. Let's put 5 million yen or 10 million yen from some of our excess capital. Let's bring in the CEO because we have these fantastically smart people and create a company and create a business. So we did about 5 of those, and all 5 of those failed. Some failed quickly, a couple very slowly, a couple very, very painfully, type of thing. And that all gave me an education about, okay, how can you do a tech startup here? I wasn't the founder at the time. And there was still not much knowledge in Japan about startups, how to build a tech company. So I went out to other entrepreneurs because I didn't want to tell my story. Nobody wants to read about my story, I thought. So let's go out to other entrepreneurs and get their story. And also let's not make it they're so awesome and they're charismatic and they were just so successful. All of the bad parts about their startup story. So, all of the difficult kind of times. So I was able, as a fellow entrepreneur, and I knew what questions to ask, I could get those stories out. Some people were more helpful than others. They just allowed the interview to stay like that. Some people went with a horrible red pen and just cut out everything really interesting. So the purpose of that book was really to help people understand about how to build a startup, and that it's not easy and it's ugly and it's kind of painful. And it became Amazon #1 in all of Japan, not just category #1. And that also changed my life.